April 1945, south of Kustrin, Captain Yuri Malkov entered a half-collapsed bunker as artillery shook loose flakes of concrete. His scouts had reported commands spoken in his exact tone, though he had been 50 meters away. The conceptual enemy was not Germany, but perception itself. A declassified NKVD directive identifies Site V17 as a cognitive resonance lab, operating between 7 and 12 Hertz. Internal notes show collapse rates rising by 30% whenever exposure exceeded 90 seconds, far above safe neural thresholds. Yuri stepped deeper, lantern trembling. The air seemed to vibrate in slow waves that brushed his skin like static. His breath tightened as if the bunker inhaled with him, synchronizing its rhythm to his pulse. Archived memos detail engineers' warning of amplitude drift by as much as 15% during field operations. Command dismissed these concerns, calling them byproducts of productive instability. A terrified soldier grabbed Yuri's sleeve, insisting he heard Yuri giving orders moments earlier. No radios had functioned since dawn. Yuri felt pressure spike behind his eyes, like thoughts trying to force their way in. Incident summaries note 18 identical reports within a single hour. Statistical officers wrote the chance of parallel hallucination, below 1%, yet marked the anomaly as operationally significant. Yuri descended into a steel-lined chamber, where the hum thickened into bone-deep pressure. Shadows jittered against the walls in broken rhythm. He sensed not sound, but intention gathering in the resonance. Technical logs describe coil misalignment, exceeding 5 millimeters, generating interference webs capable of distorting internal auditory boundaries. Several technicians petitioned for shutdown. All requests were rejected. A whisper rose inside Yuri's skull, speaking his childhood nickname. Information found nowhere in military files. His knees weakened. The voice felt neither human nor machine, yet intimately familiar. Voronov, the NKVD officer in charge, entered with cold fury. He accused the scientists of cowardice and cited a directive threatening transfer to penal battalions for anyone obstructing advancement of cognitive weaponry. The hum deepened until Yuri felt it vibrating through his teeth, turning the air sharp with metallic taste. A faint silhouette quivered at the chamber's edge, as if reality struggled to render it fully. Neurophysiology logs from April 1945 report temporal lobe spikes rising over 40% under these frequencies. Analysts warned of internal speech externalization, but NKVD oversight dismissed it as theoretical excess. A soldier convulsed near the door, shouting that the orders came from somewhere behind his own thoughts. Yuri held him steady, but the man recoiled as if Yuri's touch belonged to someone else entirely. Cognitive reconstructions decades later indicate directive hallucinations formed once amplitude reached 10 Hertz. Decision pathways misfired, producing commands that felt both alien and intimate. The technician begged Voronov to reduce power, hands shaking over the dials. Voronov refused and demanded a 15% increase, forcing Yuri to watch fear swell across the room. Coil readings from that surge exceeded safe load by 30%. Engineers documented unstable resonance meshes linked to early synchronized hallucination clusters, though several entries remain partially redacted. The hum fractured into jagged pulses. Somewhere within it, a distant scream warped into a child's voice. His own. The chamber wasn't replaying sound. It was mining memory. Post-war studies describe episodic distortions where recall degraded by half within fractions of a second. Analysts still debate whether these events emerged from feedback or internal collapse. Yuri turned as the technician stared past him with shrinking pupils. "It's standing inside the field," he whispered, pointing at nothing visible. The temperature around them dropped abruptly. Thermal logs record a sudden 6 degrees Celsius spike, with no evidence of coil overheating. The anomaly remains unexplained due to missing timestamps and incomplete sensor records. Yuri grabbed the technician's arm, trying to pull him away from the console, but the man barely reacted. His gaze was locked into the vibrating haze, as though the field held him in a grip stronger than fear. Yuri felt his heartbeat sink to the pulsing hum. Psychometric records show entrainment occurring within 30 seconds at these amplitudes. Subjects lost up to 20% of volitional control and exhibited heightened vulnerability to intrusive auditory distortions. A voice glided across Yuri's mind with impossible calm. It was neither internal nor external, more like a thought forming without him. His breath broke into short, panicked bursts as recognition dissolved. Review panels in 1962 debated whether this was cross-signal entanglement or spontaneous neural projection. The missing pages from the original file prevented any definitive conclusion. Voronov ordered a full-spectrum sweep, shouting that they were close to awakening the latent field. Yuri protested, but Voronov pressed a pistol to his chest, locking everyone inside with the growing resonance. Historical entries confirm NKVD protocol failures, increased in late-stage war operations by nearly 40%. Command allowed extreme discretionary power to accelerate results before Berlin fell. The field surged, bending shadows into unnatural angles. Multiple whispers echoed Yuri's memories in mismatched order, asking questions in tones that belonged to people long dead. His sense of self thinned dangerously. Analysts later noted perception drift peaks when waveform instability passed 9%. Subjects described ego slippage and multi-voice blends, with striking uniformity across unrelated tests. A soldier collapsed, laughing and sobbing as he screamed that someone else was remembering his childhood for him. His fingers clawed at his helmet before he fell unconscious. Medical logs detail 17 similar collapses within 40 minutes. EEG signatures shared an irregular limbic spike, suggesting a common disruption pattern triggered by field saturation. Yuri staggered back as the hum pressed into his skull, each pulse peeling away fragments of identity. The resonance felt no longer like a sound, but an intelligence searching for an anchor. The lights flickered, then steadied with a sickly green hue. Yuri felt a sudden pressure in his chest, as if the air thickened into liquid. A shape coalesced inside the resonance haze, built from shifting fragments of faces. Frequency logs recovered years later show an abrupt drop from 11 to under 5 hertz. Engineers insisted such a plunge should have shut the system down, yet somehow the chamber sustained output without recorded power loss. The fragments twisted into versions of people Yuri knew. His mother, a fallen comrade, Voronov. Yet their expressions were wrong, too deliberate, like masks trying to understand emotion by imitation. Witness reports note these visual intrusions failed to match stored memory patterns. Instead, they aligned with emotional imprints, suggesting the field reads states rather than images. Voronov shouted in triumph, claiming they had achieved cognitive manifestation. He lunged toward the console to raise amplitude again. Yuri tackled him, begging him to stop, but Voronov fought like a zealot. A 1949 tribunal described Voronov as suffering ideational contamination, implying prolonged exposure had warped his decision hierarchy beyond recovery. The hum swelled into a crushing wave. Yuri's vision spiraled into tunnels of distorted light. Voices recited fragments of his past in reversed order, building a chorus that felt rehearsed, practiced, waiting. Engineers later argued whether this was memory scrambling or an emergent feedback loop. The archives contain conflicting interpretations, several marked inconclusive due to missing appendices. The technician suddenly snapped from his trance and slammed the emergency lever. Sparks burst across the panel. The chamber roared, lights stuttered, then everything collapsed into silence so complete it felt unnatural. Within 90 seconds, cortisol levels in surviving subjects fell by more than 30%. Symptoms faded rapidly, confirming the disturbances relied entirely on active resonance. Voronov clawed at the ruined console, screaming that they had silenced the awakening. Guards restrained him as he thrashed, demanding they restore the field. His fixation never broke. Debriefing interviews produced wildly inconsistent accounts, yet disturbing parallels repeated. Voices shaped from personal memories, and an intelligence that seemed to learn from them. NKVD Command terminated the program weeks before Berlin fell, citing operational instability. All equipment was destroyed. Roughly 20% of files remain missing or intentionally removed from the registry. If archives like these shouldn't vanish forever behind sealed doors, Hit Like So YouTube keeps pushing these forgotten fragments of wartime history. Years later, Yuri stood before the collapsed bunker, listening for the hum. There was none. But the silence felt aware, as if whatever once reached for their minds now waited patiently for someone to listen again,